Hey, what's up, y'all? We're going to talk about Wylder today. Wylder is an awesome character, and I think he's a character that a lot of people gravitate to in the first couple of playthroughs, which makes sense, right? He's the character that they have you use for the tutorial, and I think that was a really good choice. He's a pretty well-rounded character. He has an A in strength and a B in dexterity, so he's a slightly strength-focused quality character. The cool thing about that is just that most of the weapons that you find will be pretty effective with Wylder. You don't really have to be too choosy, and you can more or less, go with whatever weapon types you like. If you really like katanas, not optimal for Wylder, but it'll be just fine. If you really like great swords, that's perfect. If you like colossal weapons, again, it's going to be pretty good. So, pretty well-rounded character. He's got really nice character skills and a really nice character ultimate ability. His passive is really good as well. Another reason that it's good for beginner characters is because it'll save your life, once per day, with the passive thing that allows you to tank one hit that would have otherwise killed you. So the way that I play with Wylder, and the way that I've really been enjoying playing with Wylder, and maybe you play with him this way as well, I really stack on the stance-breaking passives and relics, as well as the relics and passives that boost my critical hits. So whatever I can find in the runs, whatever relics that I have that kind of fit that mold, that's generally what I build around for this character. And I try to get as many critical hits as I can. Now, another way that I do that is by parrying. So you saw me parry a second ago, and it makes sense. Wylder does have a small shield in his starting kit. It's got the buckler parry on it, which is pretty good. It's pretty easy to use. It has a really quick startup compared to the other parries, so it comes out a little bit quicker. And you might be surprised at the number of enemies that you can parry. So you can parry enemies like this Zamor Knight, you can parry Crucible Knights, Banished Knights, quite a few bosses you can parry, Leonin Misbegottens, and a whole ton of enemies. And it gives you a free critical hit, which is just a really good way to get a ton of burst damage. Now, aside from the small shield that Wylder starts with, you're going to find shields pretty often as part of his kind of rotation of rewards that he gets from defeating bosses. What you should look out for is Carry and Retaliation. Carry and Retaliation will parry incoming spells, and it also has more parry frames than the standard parry on a small shield. So it's a really good one to watch for, probably the best one that you can get. Here's a quick tip that's kind of specific to this Everjail with the 3 Crystallians. So I've got 2 teammates that are casting spells primarily and doing no damage because these enemies aren't stance broken yet. So I've got a Revenant and a Recluse on my team. What I'm going to do, instead of finishing that one enemy, is I'm going to stance break him, move on to this guy, I'm going to stance break him really quickly, and then I'll go find the 3rd Crystallian. And once they've all been stance broken, my teammates are free to do a ton of damage to these enemies, whereas before it looked like they were doing just kind of double-digit damage with their spell casts. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I tend to open up fights against bosses with Wylder in order to get a really quick stance break. And it's pretty simple. So what you want to do is run in and start with either a jump attack, or you can use the relic that gives you the fire spin attack when you're using great swords, or if you can sneak in a charged attack or a weapon art, that's good as well. And then wait until the enemy queues up their attack like this, queue up my ultimate, and trade it. And that makes sure that you're getting a little bit of extra stance damage in before the ult. Pretty much guarantees the stance break, but it also makes sure that you're not going to miss the ult. There's certain enemies, like a Wolf of Radagon or a Black Knife Assassin, and they jump all around, and it makes it so that you're somewhat likely to miss that ultimate, and that's devastating when that happens. So the strategy from there is to hit them with charged attacks as they're standing up, and you're quickly going to get another stance break, especially if you're doing some parrying and kind of constantly putting them down on the ground and then hitting them as they're standing up. Now, quickly, I'll talk about the character skill, which I like to call the whip. So what you're seeing right here is just a little grapple jump that you can learn. So do the skill just in the open flat land and then jump before you fully grapple in, and that's going to give you that boost forward, and you're actually going to keep your momentum when you hit the ground. Here's another way you can use the whip, just by quickly getting back into the fight if you get knocked back. So I was able to get back in there, and I didn't get the crit there because my teammate was right on it, but I was able to get back in there quick enough to get the crit if I needed to. And then here's another really good use case for the character skill. So these little scarabs, they can be a little bit slippery, and this will help you, just kind of grab them, pull them in, and make sure that you're not going to waste too much time tracking them down. Now, the whip can also be used really effectively as a finisher. So primarily, it's going to pull smaller enemies towards you, or it'll pull yourself towards larger enemies. And both of these are really fun, really satisfying to use. but it can also be used as a finisher. So in this case, we're going to use it just to finish reviving our teammate who's there, and they're kind of in the middle of the enemies in a bit of a dangerous spot. We don't really want to jump in there in a time like that, but we're able to quickly get the revive and get our teammate back in the game. And then there's the kind of opposite. So we can use it to heal, but we can also use it to finish off enemies when they have just a tiny little bit of health left. We can hit them with that little whip shot, finish them off, and you know, ideally get it down to just one enemy and not have to fight a 2-on-1 in a situation like that. So overall, I really love this character skill. I think it's super fun, super versatile. But right there you saw how devastating the ult can be. And you've been seeing that throughout this video actually. So the amount of stance damage that it does is immense. I would recommend always charging up the ult. You're going to do a lot more stance damage, you get more iframes, so you can really just sit in any big attack that's coming your way. But we're able to hit enemies and revive allies at the same time, so that's one of the nice things. It's a huge blast, and it's actually strong enough to fully revive an ally that's on a tier 2 revive, so if they've got 2/3 of the circle. Now here's an instance where you may not want to charge the ultimate, and that's if you're fighting Maris and you don't have a lightning weapon. You can use the ultimate to knock them out of that sleep attack. However, if you don't charge the ultimate, it doesn't fully drain. It maintains about 1/4 of the charge, and you're able to get it back a lot faster. So overall, I would say this playstyle is very easy to use, but it can be pretty strong if you kind of master it as well. There's a lot of nuance to it and little things that you can do to kind of bring your skill up a little bit and be a little bit more effective. So here's an example of one of those things. What you need to do is try to find opportunities to get jump attacks and charged attacks, because those are the attacks that do a ton of stance damage. So right here, you want to think about what attacks you can jump over so that you can parlay that dodge into a jump attack. Rather than dodging through and doing like a roll light attack, it's much better to do a jumping heavy attack. Now here's another thing that you can kind of learn in order to kind of take your game up a little bit with Wylder, and that's the timing for different enemies to get the crit here. So for instance, dragons are down on the ground for a really long time. I was able to get back-to-back charged heavy attacks there, and if I was using a different weapon class, I probably could have gotten 3 charged attacks, or maybe 2 charged attacks and a light attack at least. Here's one more strategy that I've kind of found works pretty well. It wasn't really necessary to do on this Banished Knight here, but I just wanted to kind of illustrate and kind of get a good example for you. So when you find an ice weapon, you can frostbite an enemy, and then when you use the relic that gives you the flame spin attack, that's the attack I'm talking about right there, you're able to reset the frostbite. So I switch back to the frost hammer here, and I'm able to frostbite him again. And I'm able to do that repeatedly because I have free access to fire with no FP cost. So that allows me to trigger like the frostbite blasts fairly often on enemies. And of course this would be a lot more effective on a boss type enemy than it would on a smaller enemy like a Banished Knight. But I just wanted to kind of illustrate that for you, and I was able to get the clip against the Banished Knight, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so I'm going to talk about relics, passives, and talismans and how I try to put this build together now. There's one specific relic that I use for this build that you can grab for yourself, and it's the Dark Knight of the Baron. So you get this for beating the Everdark Gaping Jaw boss. And what this gives you is improved critical hits +1, and then also improved critical hits. So I think those combine to equal improved critical hits +2. And then critical hits earn runes. That's minor, it's 300 runes every time you get a crit. That's not really game changing, it's a little bonus, but improving your critical hits on the relics is really nice, and it ensures you're always going to have that increased critical hit power. But in order to take that up a little bit, you can look for the Dagger Talisman throughout your runs, and you can also look for the passive on weapons that gives you improved critical hits. So a lot of times this will be 10%. If you stack a couple of these, plus the Dagger Talisman, plus the relics, then you're able to do quite a bit of damage with crits. Now the other relics I use are just whatever I can find that gives me increased stance breaking when two-handing weapons, because I prefer to use two-handing weapons, although you can definitely go for the increased stance breaking when wielding 2 weapons and try to prioritize jump attacks. That's another really fun way to play as well. I personally like to go two-handed and try to go for more charged attacks. Charged attacks are a little bit better for stance breaking, and I just find it a little bit more fun personally, but either one is totally fine. So that's generally what I prioritize for relics. And then anything that gives me increased stance breaking and increased critical attacks. But don't overlook the Assassin's Crimson Dagger, something like that. It's the one that gives you the health back every time you get a critical attack. That can come in really handy, especially if you're doing some parrying. And maybe you whiff on the parry every once in a while, so that's something that's going to help refill your health a little bit. Most importantly, take the passive that gives you increased stance breaking to enemies, and take the passive that gives you increased damage to enemies after doing a critical hit. As a bonus, there is one that gives you free blood grease on your weapon after you do a crit as well. And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Peace, y'all.